Tony Campolo is with us. He is the author of Red Letter Christians, and we're going to be making an offer for you on Red Letter Christianity by DVD in a moment. But Tony, in a former conversation, we got talking about the red letters as it relates to material possessions. And there's so much more we need to discuss there. I heard you speak on one occasion, and you pointed out very accurately that, and I'll let you talk about it, the way a father raises a son, a mother raises a daughter, or parents raise their kids, starts with, you got to get an education, and?
Yeah, we indoctrinate our kids to be materialists, and then we're shocked when they listen to us. Go to school, we tell them, because if you get a good education, you'll get a good job. And if you get a good job, you'll make a lot of
money.
And if you make a lot of money, you'll be able to buy a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And then the kid says, okay, so he gets a good education, and he gets a good job, and he makes a lot of money, and he starts accumulating stuff. And we say, my son, he strayed away from the Lord. Of course, materialism always brings you away from the Lord. Jesus said it this way, back to the red letters. The red letters are the words of Jesus highlighted in red in some of those old Bibles. He says you cannot serve God and mammon, God and materialism. Søren Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher theologian, said, I wish he hadn't said you cannot. I wish he should have said, you shouldn't try to serve God and mammon, but he doesn't. Either you will love the one and reject the other, or you will hold to the first and reject the other. Whoa, there it is. He puts it in stark terms. It's either Jesus and his lifestyle, or it's the materialistic lifestyle. And we are raising our kids to be materialist, and then we act as though that we're surprised when they live out what we have subtly communicated to them in all kinds of ways. And we're not only communicating it to them, but the media is. You know, I think that this television station here is doing its best to say, you know, we want to communicate a new set of values via the media than the one that comes across in the general secular media, because it's totally materialistic. I mean, you watch an hour television show, you're going to spend 10 minutes watching ads that tell you to buy stuff you don't need. I mean, you got to face that fact. Let me tell you this. I find that among university students that they will listen to any talk about Jesus, but they have no confidence that the church has much to do with Jesus. I had a kid that I led to Christ, led into a Christian experience. He was a Jewish kid at the University of Pennsylvania. He was one of my grad assistants. And I referred him to what I felt was a good, solid Bible teaching church in Philadelphia. A month later, he came into my office, he sat down, we were talking. He said, you know that church you sent me to? I said, yeah. He said, you know, if you told that pastor, I want you to preach a series of sermons that contradicts every thing that Jesus said, you would get exactly what I'm hearing on Sunday morning. That was a shocker.
Whoa.
Let me just say, I find that most young people who reject Jesus do not reject Jesus. They reject Jesus as he has been defined by middle-class, affluent American society. We have created a Jesus in our own image, and we are presenting that, and they reject it. And they say, that Jesus has no attraction to us. You give them the Jesus that comes through in the red letters of the Bible with his countercultural, anti-materialistic lifestyle. They say, that's fascinating. How come I've never heard that before? And it's because the church refuses to preach Jesus because his words are too tough for most of us to handle.
Oh, when Jesus said of himself, foxes have holes, the birds of the air have nests, the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. He was essentially saying, I'm homeless.
Yeah.
Was he setting up as a paradigm for us to follow?
Well, I think it was. But let me just say that Paul in the 7th chapter, back to Paul, 1 Corinthians 7th chapter, says if you really want to follow Jesus, this is a very strong statement, don't get married.
Oh.
I mean, he says that clearly.
Yeah.
He says once you get married, you're in a compromised situation. He says it very clearly. On the one hand, you want to do what Jesus called you to do. On the other hand, you got kids, you got a family, you got a wife, and you're torn between the two. He never tells you how to resolve the problem, incidentally. And most ministers don't know how to resolve the problem. Sometimes, I love Andrew Stanley, who says, you got to cheat. You hear, what do you mean cheat? Yeah, he says, you only have so much time, so many resources. In the end, you're either going to cheat God or cheat your family. So if you got to make the decision, cheat God. God can handle it. Your family can't. I think that once you get married, you have an obligation to your family you cannot ignore. And it does put you in a compromised situation. Paul says, recognize that. And basically, he says, insofar as it is possible. I love that word. Insofar as it is possible, he says in the 5th chapter of Galatians, do good unto everyone, especially unto those who are of the household of faith. Note, he recognizes that you may be in a situation where you can't do all that you feel you ought to do, but do what it is possible for you to do. And that's all I ever ask of people, and I think for married couples, that's all Jesus asks of any of them. Namely, are you doing all that you possibly could do for Christ in the kingdom?
Now, I've known of 2 cases where children of missionary parents saw their parents wave goodbye as they left for China, and in one case left for Egypt, for 6, 7, 8 years at a time, leaving their children in the hands of others. And when they returned, not even able to recognize their children.
Yep.
And it's forever scarred their children's lives, even as adults. Is this a good thing?
No. No, I think that when you walk away from your family like that, and that has happened all too often,
yeah.
and you don't even have to do that. I know pastors who are so involved in the work of the church that their kids, I have had kids at Eastern University said, you know, it's one thing to compete with your brother with sibling rivalry, you know, who's going to get the most time and the most attention. It's quite another to feel that you're competing against God for the attention of your father. You have an obligation to fulfill in that respect. I always tell my students who ask the question you have, we live in a very opportune time. Chances are, with the good diet that you have and the exercise, you're going to live to about 80. Basically, I'm 76, going on 77. I'm going to probably live to 80. I'll be glad if I do. Having said that, I can divide up my life into 2 sections. The first section, I take care of my family. Probably at the age of 40. That leaves me 40 more years to say, okay, I fulfilled that responsibility. Incidentally, nobody ever asked the obvious question. Why did Jesus wait till he was 30 until he started his messianic ministry? The answer is obvious. Joseph probably died when he was still a boy. All scholars are agreed to that. He died when he was just a boy. And he was the elder son. He had to run the carpenter shop. He had to take care of his family. And he does. And then at a particular point, he leaves the job and leaves the shop in the hands of his brothers and goes out and does what he was called to do. And his mother and father come, his mother and his brothers come, and they come in and say, your mother and your brothers are... And he says, what have I to do with thee, woman? Whoa, I have fulfilled my responsibility to you. I have done what I was supposed to do. I have to get on to other things now.